Alex Meehan, Senior Staff Writer for Dicebreaker.com, and I'm here to tell you what I thought of the new terrifyingly spooky board game, Betrayal at House on the Hill, 3rd edition. That was a mouthful. So strap in, turn out the lights, check your doors locked, check it again, and join me as I review the latest entry in the Betrayal series. Now, first things first, let's get this out of the way. If you don't like Betrayal at House on the Hill, the newly released 3rd edition is not going to change your mind. Despite the myriad of changes featured in the latest version, which is now available in the UK, it still provides much the same experience as the now decade-old plus 2nd edition. Players still control a roster of doomed characters with varied traits as they move through a haunted house, encountering spooky goings-on, and they still roll a lot of dice. The roller coaster gameplay of Betrayal won't appeal to everyone, but if you've always enjoyed the kind of silliness that Betrayal offered, or if you're at least curious about it, then 3rd edition provides the best possible version that isn't an expansion. Anyway, but more on that later. Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition is a board game for horror lovers. It takes many of the tropes that horror fans are familiar with: a haunted house, a group of unsuspecting but plucky adventurers, ghosts, serial killers and more, and stuffs them into one big, messy, yet irresistibly charming package. The core gameplay of Betrayal is incredibly simple. Players take turns to move their miniatures across a series of interconnected tiles, drawing cards and rolling dice along the way, all whilst waiting for that one fateful moment when one of them might turn against the rest as a traitor. But Betrayal has never been about its core gameplay. The joy of the game comes from its atmosphere and its stories. It's like a toy box of horror, providing players with everything they need to play out their own spooky scenarios. How good those scenarios are really depends on which toys players take out of the box. Specifically, the quality of the game's various storylines, also known as haunts. But 3rd edition does a good job of pushing players in the right direction. For example, the inclusion of these scenario cards is not new to the Betrayal series, having made their debut in the Scooby Doo themed spin-off game, Betrayal at Mystery Mansion. However, their inclusion in this version of Betrayal is very much appreciated. Not only do they add to the game's ability to tell an overarching narrative by providing a starting point, which then feeds into the eventual haunt, they also make Betrayal an easier game to play right. But what do I mean by right? Now, I don't tend to support arguments that put the onus on players to experience a board game in a certain way, because it can come off as subtle gatekeeping or putting other people off playing because they're doing it differently from you. However, Betrayal is one of those board games that is exceptionally better when the players approach it in the right way. Mostly this means getting on board with its spooky atmosphere and heavy emphasis on luck. But it can also mean making certain choices, such as having fewer, shorter pauses in gameplay, as breaks can ruin immersion and simmer down the excitement. And this often happens in a game like Betrayal, where new concepts are introduced every playthrough, but it can be mitigated by good role writing and layout design, which 3rd edition certainly improves on compared to its predecessors. Another choice is avoiding replaying haunts. The inclusion of the scenario cards in 3rd edition helps players to avoid slowing down and running into the same haunts by simplifying the haunt trigger process and attaching almost every haunt to a particular scenario card. Don't want to risk playing the same haunt twice? Use a different scenario card. Player turns in Betrayal 3rd edition have also been altered, ending whenever players discover a room rather than when they draw a card, which is another rule that was introduced in Betrayal at Mystery Mansion. Thanks, Scoob. Haunt rolls have also been adjusted to have players roll a die for each omen that's been found, with 5 or more triggering the scenario, a change that was first featured in the Dungeons & Dragons themed game Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. These changes serve to somewhat prevent haunts from occurring far too early in the game, which can break things just a tiny bit. I say somewhat because the system is not foolproof. For example, the haunt happened relatively quickly in the first game I ever played, but it at least guarantees that a haunt isn't going to trigger within the first 2 turns. This allows players time to immerse themselves in the story and the atmosphere before they dig into the main course of the game. It also gives players more of a chance to find some decent gear and trait improvements before they start doing more dangerous stuff like combat, making the competition a bit more balanced. Beyond this, there are a whole host of minor improvements featured within 3rd edition that make it a better experience than its predecessor. For example, the inclusion of a reluctant traitor option, which enables any player who finds themselves burdened with the role of traitor able to pass it to someone more willing, or certain event cards leading to specific haunts should the players ever want to roll for them, or tiles featuring trait increases granting them to the player that discovered them rather than anyone who happens to end their turn there, not to mention the many cosmetic changes such as the new artwork, better quality miniatures, easier to use player boards, and a more diverse roster of characters. All of these alterations are excellent additions to the core Betrayal formula and collectively ensure that 3rd edition serves as a greatest hits collection for the series. However, they do not fix the fundamental issues that will undoubtedly be a major turn-off for some players. All the haunts featured in Betrayal's new edition are new. Some are even sequels to haunts found in previous editions, such as the return of Crimson Jack and the Witches. Having played several and read through the remainder of the 50 included, the game undoubtedly still has its fair share of duds. The handful of haunts I experienced firsthand while writing this review were fairly average. None of them have been as miserably simple as the kill the spiders kind, though there are a few of those featured in 3rd edition. But they've not reached the kind of creative heights found in Widow's Walk, which was an expansion released for Betrayal's previous edition. There are certainly some interesting looking haunts found within the Traitor's Tome and Secrets of Survival books for 3rd edition, including most of the co-op style haunts that have no traitor, which were previously almost always the most boring kind of haunt. However, the free-for-all haunts wherein all players are working against each other appear to be quite dull, and many of the traitor versus heroes haunts feel like they'd be a lot more fun for one side than the other. Nevertheless, at least the themes for the haunts veer away from the typical horror tropes that the 2nd edition relied upon just a bit too much. Instead, the haunts in 3rd edition bounce from incredibly silly yet charming, including clear homages to Jaws and The Lord of the Rings, to ever so slightly creepy ones, like someone stealing people's body parts. Regardless, they're always offering something unexpected. Still, it's a shame that the writing team didn't experiment more and create something closer to the aforementioned Widow's Walk, as the expansion took the concept of Betrayal to so many weird and wonderful places. Don't get me wrong, Widow's Walk still has plenty of haunts that are outright unbalanced, but at least they experimented with gameplay mechanics and concepts in a way that made them memorable. After all, the best kind of B horror movie doesn't necessarily focus upon trying to tell a cohesive story, but on providing its audience with as many fun moments as possible. I just wish that Betrayal 3rd edition had leaned into this approach more than it does, rather than taking the safer route with its themes and gameplay. On the other hand, I understand the need to offer a more accessible and conservative experience in your core release. Hopefully, Avalon Hill will give Widow's Walk the remake treatment to go alongside this new and improved version of Betrayal. Regardless, 3rd edition is undoubtedly the best core entry in the series. The quality of life changes make it a smoother and more accessible experience that has plenty of genuine love for the series sprinkled all over it. So if you love Betrayal at House on the Hill, you'll love 3rd edition. If you want to experience Betrayal, then play 3rd edition. Just be sure to give the Widow's Walk expansion for the 2nd edition a try, if you can. You won't regret it. Or will you? Ooh! Just kidding. If you'd like to watch more reviews, you can catch plenty right now here on the Dicebreaker YouTube channel. If you enjoy the written word, you can also find reviews on the website, dicebreaker.com, including this one. We also did a Let's Play of Betrayal 3rd edition, so you can watch the game in action. Otherwise, be sure to like, subscribe, click the bell icon to be notified about all our latest videos, because there's nothing scarier than missing out. For even more, be sure to join Dicebreaker Plus, where you can find loads of fantastic videos, including extra spooky ones. But for now, don't venture into any abandoned, creepy-looking houses, and have yourselves a lovely day. Bye!